Um, yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm actually quite curious also to get to know you a little better. So I try now when I start my talk that we have enough time also for a discussion. And yeah, you actually made my very first slide a little obsolete because I prepared this to introduce myself, but you did it so nicely that I really want to briefly touch upon something that I think characterizes not only myself, but also the way how I conduct research and how I teach. That is that I left academia for a while and that I was working for LANXESS, that is a specialty chemical group. So at least in the German, how do we say, pursuing an academic career in Germany is usually that you stay at university or that you stay in research. And yeah, I was leaving university. Why? I really knew after or during my PhD that I really like research and teaching, but I was not 100% sure if I really want to pursue an academic career because it's a tough one. And or at least the way is a tough one. And from a today's perspective, I'm quite happy that I was spending some time in industry because it allowed me a very new perspective, and it really inspires me to teach action-based formats that I really have an eye on, that my students gain competencies that they can apply in their future career in most likely industry. And why I wanted to highlight my time in the industry was because the research project that I will present today is largely inspired from my time at LANXESS, because when I was working for LANXESS, I was employed at the strategy department. So we were only 4 people working on the corporate strategy. So my boss, and he had 3 employees, and he was directly reporting to the top management team, so to the CEO. And at that time, when I was working, I started in 2016 to work for LANXESS. At that time, digitalization and sustainability were becoming a top priority, and the corporation did not know what sustainability means. From a today's perspective, probably a little crazy, but back in the days, they did not have a proper understanding of how to translate the very broad phenomenon of sustainability and how to incorporate it in the corporate strategy. And one of my tasks, or what I did when I was working for LANXESS, was to develop an impact framework for the company so that the company was able to assess its larger societal and environmental impacts that it creates. So leaving it to that, so sustainability impacts are right. I added the sun. So before I move on, are there any questions on my background so far? Otherwise, yeah.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I'm just curious, why did you move away from industry, and how easy was it to reintegrate back?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And when I decided to go back to university, a lot of people were asking it to me because obviously the wages are way different in industry. But I totally, how do you say that? I totally felt that I belong at university because this is really where I see my purpose, where I feel where my passion is to, and I really wanted to go back to research and teaching. And it was not that working for or in industry was bad, not at all. I mean, it was very fair, and I really gained a lot of great experiences. But I mean, this is totally not part of my today's talk, but it's sometimes also super frustrating, to be honest, because having very great ideas in mind, and especially large corporations are so slow in really making a transformation. Yeah, so I decided to go back. So I'm very happy at the end of today's talk, if you have any more also personal question, to be open today. So what I thought I will yeah, what I thought I bring for today's talk is a little bit about one of my major research topic, and that is the phenomenon of sustainable entrepreneurship. And I will introduce to you why I'm so motivated in asking new questions on sustainable entrepreneurship. And I will start with a question. What do you see here on this picture? Simply, okay? Fields? Flower fields? Okay, flowers, vegetables. You all have very nice thoughts. Sunflowers, water body. So I will just repeat what you say. Farms. Mm-hmm. All right.
It looks like body and roundabout sunflowers.
Okay, sunflowers, maybe tulips. Rooftops. Okay, I move on and zoom in a little. Do you still think these are flowers, vegetables, waste? Can you guess what kind of waste? Plastic? Non-degradable? These are the so-called bicycle graveyards. And yes, unfortunately, yes. So this is a dump, obviously, from the very first picture. They were nicely in a row, putting nicely in a row. And unfortunately, there's not one bicycle graveyard, there are more. And it was at a time when, I mean, we also have it here in Bonn, right? Bike sharing companies. I mean, DB, for instance, is offering bike sharing, but also there are some smaller startups. And that was what happened in China. And actually, it started with a great purpose, with a good sustainable mission that they wanted to contribute to the more sustainable mobility in the large mega cities. And they were offering bike rental. So the business idea was to come with a bike rental company to the market. And what happened was that because the market wasn't regulated, too many startups were coming to at the same time to the market. And the very sad thing, what happened is that something that intentionally was designed with a good purpose was turning into something that created a massive amount of waste, right? A massive amount of waste. And so I wanted to start with this very illustrative and also to some extent shocking example to highlight one of the large motivations that guides my own research is the overarching questions: how can entrepreneurs create positive sustainability impact, and how can they really stick to the values, stick to the purpose, and how can they effectively contribute to a sustainable development? And since we are in academia, I will start with the definition because we like definitions. So what is entrepreneurship actually? Entrepreneur is someone who founds his or her own company, who is, for instance, a founder himself or herself. And we can ask, and that was actually what happened more than 10 years ago when I started to conduct research in the field of sustainable entrepreneurship. Many scholars were asking, oof, but why do we need a new phenomenon, sustainable entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship per se is something social. Okay, I can understand this criticism to some extent because entrepreneurship per se has some social aspects, simply because of the fact that when you yourself found your own company, you address customer needs, you fulfill desires, you simply because of the fact that you sell goods, you pay taxes, you contribute to your nation, if you grow, you hire new employees. So to some extent, there are some very social aspects that you can agree upon. But sustainable entrepreneurship, how I understand it, that's the one here in the middle, moves beyond this, very one-dimensional view on entrepreneurship that is oftentimes referred to as conventional or rather traditional entrepreneurship, because mainly entrepreneurs, or that was how the understanding in academia was until sustainable entrepreneurship was developed, was that entrepreneurs found their own company to become quite rich, to make a living, to become wealthy. So, and over the course of the years, researchers found out, okay, but this is not true. There are so many good ones out there who really want to make a change, who really want to make a difference, who really want to solve any social or ecological problems. So what the backbone of the definition of sustainable entrepreneurship is the triple bottom line accounting. So you know the triple bottom line thinking of Elkington. Do you know it? Have you heard of it? Okay. So usually traditional financial accounting and reporting of corporations is that you publish in your annual report, you publish your financial KPIs. And Elkington, the author in the 90s, was saying, okay, this is not enough. Firms should also publish their social KPIs and their environmental KPIs, because they should have a strategy on how they make progress, not only in financial terms, but also in terms of their social performance and their environmental performance. So this is a triple bottom line, that firms should not only push on their financial performance, but also on their social and ecological performance. And this three-dimensionality is what best describes or characterizes sustainable entrepreneurship, that sustainable entrepreneurs want to push, or that they want to increase the economic value they gain, but also the environmental and the social one. So so having this here with the definitional clarity, so when this whole literature stream on sustainable entrepreneurship was taking up, one of the most, from a today's perspective, one of the most cited publication was the introduction of the so-called sustainable entrepreneurial process, which means that the authors were finding that usually a sustainable entrepreneurship process is a little more complex than what researchers up to that date were thinking the entrepreneurial process looks like. And the authors found out that the sustainable entrepreneurship process typically starts with individuals observing an ecological or social problem, and then that those individuals who were really discovering and evaluating, digging deeper into this issue or the problem, that they recognize a solution for such a problem, and that they have the passion and the desire to address the problem, to come up with a solution. And the good thing is, and this is, for instance, also something that I largely discuss with my students, this is something that we can all, this can be trained, right? To how can you define problems, how can you observe issues deeply, and how can you develop solutions. And along the process, the scholars found out that developing a solution, adding a clear goal for the other dimensions, for the second and also for the third bottom line, is something that describes how sustainable entrepreneurs actually form their sustainable enterprise before they enter the market. I have some examples. I mean, maybe I'm also curious to know if you might have some sustainable startups in mind where you think that they make, or where you think they address a good cause. Who of you is using Ecosia, for instance? You know Ecosia? It's a very good search engine. And in contrast to Google, for instance, they plant a tree for every search that you that you ask. So this is Ecosia, very, it's a very famous impact startup from Germany, for instance. ECF or Infarm, do you know Infarm from Berlin? Like indoor farming company. ECF, an aquaponic farm system from Berlin. Fly Foods is a protein-based organic milk alternative. Lagunary is a Cologne-based startup here from our region who are dry aging fish to eat a fish from head to tail, like similar topic from nose to tail, like while eating cows. Yeah, so there are luckily there are many startups who really want to make a change and who really want to address a social and ecological problem. So here, obviously, you cannot really read them because it's too small. It's just that I really want to show you there's a great overview of all the impact startups in the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And this whole topic of sustainable entrepreneurship is picking up also in a practical from a practical view. Is there anything that came up in your mind when I was talking about sustainable startups? Any case example you would like to share? Probably you all knew some without even knowing. Vital, do you know Vital? Also a Cologne-based startup who have this boxes or recaps when you go out for lunch, for instance.
Using economics jargon, would you agree with the definition that a social entrepreneur is one that on top of the private benefit tries to create either social positive or environmental externalities with the wish to capture all that in terms of private benefits, or because there is, I mean, a positive image that you're creating?
So since I was also conducting several interviews with those entrepreneurs, it's also to some extent a philosophical question, or some are, the motivation behind why they found this company or why they want to make an impact, a positive impact. It's the answers are very diverse, because some are what we call accidentally green. For instance, some founders found great technology, and with these technology you can save so much, I don't know, greenhouse gases, whatever. But from an outsider perspective, they are so sustainable, but talking to them, it was not my purpose. It was accidentally that it turned out to be so green. You know what I mean? So some are very altruistic and they really care about society at large. Some use it for their own image. So it's very different, the motivations behind it. Yeah.
Can one say, is there any evidence of which of these are more successful in terms of also staying in the market and growing? Is it more the altruistic ones or the ones that are selfish?
The ones that are very altruistic, and maybe that also bridges a little over to my research project that I want to show you on the following slides, is that the ones that are very altruistic, they are what we call social entrepreneurs, that are usually entrepreneurs that reinvest all their earnings into their purpose to scale their impact. You know what I mean? So they are on the market because and from a time perspective, as long as the ones that are not so altruistic, because they have a different legal form. Also, a not-for-profit organization, for instance. Okay, so in my last slide, before I move on to the second chapter, is so why should we care about what I call sustainable entrepreneurship? Why should we care? And I think this is also something why I thought it's particularly interesting for me to come here to the CEF, because to get also your questions, to get your input, is because I think from a developing perspective, I mean that we have a lot of global societal issue. I don't have to list them here, but we cannot leave it to the regulatory frameworks that they have to adjust. We cannot leave it to the big companies out there, to the shareholders, to the big corporations. And we cannot leave it also to simply to ourselves. I strongly believe in that we need entrepreneurs who come up with new and novel solutions and to really have the chance, or who really can make an impact, who can disrupt whole markets, and who can change ways and how we are doing business today, or how we all address our needs today. And yeah, this is also why I think that this whole literature stream is very interconnected to a variety of other disciplines. And this is also where I really look forward to the discussion with you. So what I thought is also to make it a little more concrete, and okay, because I thought, okay, you invited me from the Institute for Entrepreneurship, but what do we do? How does our type of research looks like, right? Because probably it's a little different from how you conduct your research. And one of my research projects was on entrepreneurs' framing of sustainability impact. So when I was working for Lanxess, and now it comes a point where I want to relate to why I was highlighting my time in industry. I realized when I was working for Lanxess and my task was to develop an impact framework for the large corporation, oh wow, it's a massive step, or a big step for firms to have all the data at hand. So we were back in the days, we were quite good at having all our greenhouse gas emissions, etc. We had it. But Lanxess is a company that employs 15,000 employees, okay? So it's one of the largest German corporations. And then I was thinking, okay, but how does it look like when it comes to smaller and medium-sized companies? They don't have their data at hand. They usually don't know it because it's so expensive to have the data at hand, okay? It's simply a question of resources, not only financial resources, but also the human resource side. And then I was asking, when I was going back to university, back to the chair of entrepreneurship, I was thinking, okay, but how do sustainable entrepreneurs assess their impacts when, on a smaller scale, startups, founders don't even know their inputs precisely or their outputs, because everything is in the phase of developing, right? They have to deal with so many uncertainties, entrepreneurs. So this is a logical chain of impacts, right? We have the inputs, the activities itself, the output, and usually, and that is, remember the framework of the triple bottom line, usually what you read in the annual reports of large corporations, this is where traditional financial reporting stops. They look at inputs, outputs, sometimes also in outcomes, but mostly we stop here. So how can entrepreneurs evaluate or assess their outcomes and impacts when they even do not really know what they have here or what they aim for here? So, but since this whole topic of sustainability impacts was picking up, the very initial question of my research project was, how do they actually communicate about it? And because there is no methodology in the background or no data in the background. So then when I was digging deeper into the literature, I was founding a concept, and I will not stay for a long time here because it's simply the theoretical background of the study, but it's rooted in the literature on entrepreneurial framing, because what we see is when companies when founders, when they are at such an early stage, when they are on such a small scale, they use communication as a very important strategic tool to gain legitimacy. What does it mean? When you imagine you are in the early days of founding your own company, you need resources. You need financial resources. You have to convince investors. for instance. You have to convince a bank to receive a loan, but you also have to convince stakeholders to increase your social capital, right? To build up your network, to I don't know, have suppliers. You have to convince future employees, etc. So communication, how entrepreneurs frame what they are doing, is a big thing. So that was the theoretical perspective then that I applied. So the research question that I was applying was, how do sustainable entrepreneurs frame the positive and negative societal as well as environmental impacts created by their entrepreneurial activities? So that was a guiding research question. And when I was back in academia, I was traveling to India. The very honest reason why I was going to India was because I had a scholarship, and I was conducting a research stay at IIT Madras in the south. Have you ever been in the south of India? Is there anyone? Okay. Have you been to Auroville in close to Pondicherry? Yeah? Okay, great. So it's a very special place, isn't it? Okay, so close to Chennai, a few hours. So it took, I think it took me a 3-hour drive south. Is a small state, Pondicherry. It was a French colony, and how do you say that? A community for sustainable living is part of this little state. And what they have is that they buy land to increase their vision to be so whatever they grow, for instance, they use it for their own purpose. So they really want to be completely independent on any other structures. And many Western people live there, and it's a very spiritual place. They have a very big meditation center in the middle of their commune. And the interesting thing is, it was a very interesting context also for conducting research, because there we had also an overlap of not only sustainable entrepreneurship, but also spiritual entrepreneurship, because they so strongly believe in the vision of their community that whatever kind of entrepreneurial activity they undertake they want to increase their commune, and they want to increase their community, and they want to contribute. So I was using my time in India to conduct interviews, not only in Auroville, in this sustainable community, but also in Chennai. And when I was, after I was conducting all of the interviews, and after I was analyzing it, I found out that the interesting thing is that when entrepreneurs do not have any data at hand, when they cannot rely on any methodology, what do they do when I was asking them for the sustainability impact? So the very first thing that was quite interesting is that they were to a very large extent highlighting the positive social and environmental impacts that they create. And at the same time, the interesting thing was that they were downplaying the negative ones. So I was observing a variety of framing techniques that sustainable entrepreneurs apply. And I will also, on the next slides, I will discuss with you why it is so important to be aware of those framing techniques. So even though I was confronting them with the negative impacts that might occur along the whole value chain, they were either doing rhetoric things like blame shifting, that they were comparing their own impacts. Yeah, but my competitor XY is doing way worse, okay? Or they were blending it, so they were always mixing challenges with impacts. They were rejecting, or they were simply denying it. They were reframing them, and we're taking the negative ones and we're reframing them into something positive. Or we're saying, yes, this is something negative, but we have this much positive impact. Or they were, to some extent, justifying themselves because they had to do some kind of trade-off decisions. So in the end, what I was observing is that, and this is something that is particularly important when it comes to the practical implications of those studies, is that particularly when it comes to impacts, and I mean this whole word, or this whole buzzword of impact, is potentially also a big part of your own work, daily work or research. is when so many individuals have a different understanding and we don't have concrete mechanisms or methods or data in the background, we really we critically have to reflect upon what individuals are saying when they mean impact or when they are saying that they create some positive impact. And yeah, so particularly when it comes to the practical implications, that when you imagine that those entrepreneurs apply for funding, etc., investors really have to critically discuss and reflect upon, or discuss the whole sustainability impacts and have an eye on all the positive and negative impacts that occur along the whole value chain. And what we have a little in this whole discipline of sustainable entrepreneurship was that there was this positive undertone, right? So all the entrepreneurs per se assume that those are entrepreneurs that strive for a net positive impact, but we cannot know, or we cannot per se assume that they are creating it. We really have to reflect upon it and also develop methodologies to move on from here. I would leave it to this, and now I'm very much looking forward to the discussion with you. And since I would be super curious also to get to know you a little better and your backgrounds, I personally think that entrepreneurship is something that offers great potential probably for collaboration also with you. So I'm super open. Feel free to reach out to me. I have my contact details here. My email address, feel free, or Fazil has them. Feel free to reach out to me to, I don't know, discuss any interesting collaboration potential, either teaching, research, some transfer, practical stuff.